You that all those hours you spent playing video games might have actually been making you smarter, maybe even more resilient. For years, right, the conversation has always been about violence and addiction. But today, we're going to look at the other side of the coin, the science-backed cognitive, emotional, and social perks of gaming. And we're grounding all of this in a really fascinating 2014 paper by Granick, Lobel, and Engels.
Okay, so here's the game plan. First, we'll take on that old, tired story about gaming. Then, we're going to dive into the incredible workout your brain gets and how games can build the kind of psychological strength you can actually use in real life. We'll also look at the surprising social side of things. And finally, we'll see what this all means for the future. Let's get into it.
All right, first up, moving beyond the bad press. We've got to admit, for decades, the public conversation around video games has been, overwhelmingly negative. But as we're about to see, the real story is so much more interesting and complex. To get some perspective, let's just rewind a lot. This is Benjamin Franklin, of all people, talking about chess. It's kind of wild to think that even way back then, he saw games not as just a waste of time, but as a tool, a way to sharpen your mind and build persistence. So this whole idea that games can be a training ground for life, it's not new at all. And fast forward to today, it's more relevant than ever. Just look at this number. In the US, a staggering 97% of kids and teens play video games. Let that sink in for a second. This isn't some niche hobby anymore. It is a fundamental part of growing up. And yet, this is the story we almost always hear, right? Most of the research, most of the news, it's all focused on these potential problems. Now, the authors of our source paper say that research is important, but they argue it's given us a really, really unbalanced picture of the whole thing. And this is why. This image gets to the heart of the problem. The researchers make this brilliant point. Saying video games are bad is like saying food is bad. I mean, the category is just way too big. Are we talking about a simple puzzle game or a massive, complex online world? You just can't lump them all together. Okay, so if it's not a simple good or bad story, what are the actual benefits? Let's start with the first big pillar, what's happening inside your brain. It turns out, far from being lazy, a lot of games are a serious workout for a whole range of your cognitive skills. Which brings us to a question that might sound a little crazy. Of all the types of games out there, the one that gets the most criticism for being mindless, the shooter game, is actually where researchers have found some of the most powerful cognitive benefits. I know, it sounds counterintuitive, but here's what the studies actually show. People who play fast-paced action games get better at a whole host of things. Their attention gets faster and more accurate, they get better at processing visual info, they even show measurable gains in problem-solving and creativity. And just to be clear, this isn't guesswork. This is from a ton of controlled scientific studies. So, how powerful are these effects? Well, get this. A huge meta-analysis, which is like a study of studies, found that the improvements in spatial skills you get from playing shooter games are on par with what you'd get from high school and even college-level courses that are specifically designed to teach those skills. That is absolutely incredible. And you can literally see these changes in the brain. Using fMRI scans, researchers found that gamers' brains don't necessarily work harder, they just work smarter. They're way more efficient at dedicating their attention where it's needed and filtering out all the junk that doesn't matter. Okay, so that's the brain's hardware. But what about the software? Games are also masters at shaping our motivation and our emotions. They teach us how to tackle challenges, and maybe even more important, how to deal with failing. This all ties into this really core psychological idea called the incremental theory of intelligence. You've probably heard of it as a growth mindset. It's this simple but incredibly powerful belief that your abilities aren't set in stone. You're not just smart or not smart. Your intelligence is something you can build with effort. And if you think about it, video games are the perfect training ground for this. The whole loop of a game is built on failure. You try something, you fail, the game tells you why instantly, and you're pushed to try again with a new strategy. Games teach us that failure isn't the end, it's just data. It's part of the process. And what fuels all that persistence? Well, it's the positive emotions. There's this idea called the broaden and build theory, which says that feelings like joy and pride, or that awesome feeling of triumph gamers call fiero, they don't just feel good. They actually open our minds up, make us more creative, and build up our psychological resources for the next challenge.
And hey, on a much simpler level, games are just one of the best mood management tools around. Studies have shown that even really simple puzzle games can give your mood a serious boost, help you relax, and even act as a shield against anxiety. All right, let's talk about the big one. We have got to tackle the most stubborn stereotype of them all, the lonely, socially isolated gamer. Come on, we all know this image. It's been in movies and TV shows for decades. But the actual data from the paper we're looking at, it paints a totally different picture. The reality? More than 70% of gamers play with a friend, not alone, with other people either right there on the couch or connected online. So yeah, the whole idea of gaming as this solitary, isolating thing is pretty much dead. And here's where it gets really interesting. The research shows that the social context of the game matters way more than the content. When people play together cooperatively and get this, even in violent games, they're more likely to be helpful and pro-social, both in the game and in real life. So the key isn't what you play, it's how and who you play with. So that brings us to the end here. How are all these benefits actually being used in the real world? And what's the big picture takeaway from all this research? Well, check out this powerful example of what are called serious games. This one, Remission, was made for young cancer patients. It basically turned their treatment into a game where they control a little nanobot to fight cancer cells, and it had a real, measurable effect. A major study found it significantly improved how well patients stuck to their treatment plans. And that really brings us home to the main conclusion of the paper. The goal here isn't to just flip the script and say all games are good. The point is that the whole good versus bad debate is just outdated. The reality is complex, it's nuanced, and it really deserves a much more thoughtful conversation. So I'll leave you with this final thought. We've seen that games can be these incredible engines for building up our minds, for making us more resilient, and for teaching us how to work together. So the question isn't really if we can learn from them anymore,